Good morning. If my best friend is telling me he plans to get divorced, I think my first advice to my friends as an economist would say, have you done benefit and cost analysis? So have you done the cost may be bigger than you may think. Like the money you can save, not giving money to your wife, probably you have to pay as alimony, and probably you have to pay the money to the lawyer. So the economic benefit may be smaller than you think. So think about the cost. But if my friends tell me like I want to get divorced because all my in-laws are coming to my living room and take away my television, like a television remote control, then I would say, oh, get divorced. I think that actually happened in Brexit, I think. So, I mean, the immigration was so hard to sustain the UK's perspective. So if we know that, I think we should expect there is a possibility of the Brexit. But as an economist and the market analyst thought, based on the benefit and cost analysis, there won't be a Brexit. There was a expectation of the Brexit. And so like the market was not expecting it. If there is a Brexit, we thought this is going to be very kind of sour divorce. So the market will be impacted quite a lot. But when actually there was a Brexit, like both parties behaved very nicely. Like after the Brexit, financial market calmed down very rapidly, and it looks like that there will be a huge capital outflow in emerging markets. So emerging market is going to be hurt a lot, but actually emerging market actually benefited from the Brexit. So so far, like it looks like Brexit is not impacting the financial market very much. But we should not underestimate the impact of the Brexit. Like the impact of Brexit will come probably next year or following year. We do not know. I mean, as already two speakers talked about, like we do not know what's going to happen. So there is a huge uncertainty, but at this moment, like because of the Brexit, the impact is having limited in financial market. So today I'm going to talk about what is the impact of Brexit in other economies and also in FX and hopefully on the rates. When there was UK decide to leave the market, there were some concerns about what's going to happen to the UK economy. The main concern about the UK economy was what's going to happen to the service sector. I mean, UK is not a huge manufacturing economy. It is more like a domestic-oriented. It is more like a service-oriented economy, especially financial sector. So, I mean, even though it's a sixth largest economy, like its trading share globally, it takes less than 2%. So, I mean, if we talk about the real economy, UK's importance in global economy is not really strong. It's a 2%, less than 2% of the total the trade. But if you count as the EU, it takes around 16 or 17%. So people were concerned of what is the impact of the Brexit to the EU? Like, will there be other type of the exit from the EU? There was more concern than Brexit itself. So I mean, so like when we see the UK, with the Britain, well, Britain can survive if the service sector is strong, if construction is strong, as long as the financial market is strong. So we are concerned about what we can hurt this sector was the confidence. And not something we cannot explain in economics, but the confidence sometimes is everything economics. When the confidence goes down, it hurts the economy quite a lot. So we expect how it's going to be impacted, the confidence is in UK. So usually, maybe 2 years ago, when there was the Seoul tragedy in Korea, like 2 years ago, it was huge tragedy, but economically it was not a typhoon. I mean, in very economic sense, there was not much damage to Korea, but because of the Seoul tragedy, the whole country was affected by the sad news. So sometimes like a very small emotional thing can affect the business very much. So we expect the Brexit will have an impact in UK and EU in sentimental wise. So some institutions like a Bank of England and OECD and IMF all said because of the Brexit, the UK is going to lose like up to 60% of the GDP for next 2 years. And OECD said by 2020, like the UK is going to lose its GDP potential by 3%. So we all all institutions want the UK don't leave, like stay. That's not going to be good for your economy. We also, as a bank, thought it's not a good for the UK and EU either. So we also, right after the Brexit, we lowered our GDP forecast for the UK and EU. Like for UK's GDP growth we cut from 1.9 to 1.2%. And we may expect we may go down to like 1% this year. So UK will be obviously affected by its decision to leave the UK. As already other speakers talked about, when there is uncertainty, the firm's initial reaction is hold investment. So not knowing what's going to happen under the uncertainty, don't invest. So that if you don't invest, that usually stop the hiring the labor. That also stop the consumption. They will create a vicious cycle of the economy as a whole. So just because of the confidence, it can whole impact the economy very much. So that was the scenario. Like all the economists and the market was worrying about the Brexit. And also, I mean, we know like why the Brexit happened, as I talked about the immigration, but that problem is not just limited to the UK. That problem can go to the France, also go to Denmark and Italy. So we're all concerned about what's going to happen if the Brexit initiate a kind of leave decision of the EU. So we are concerned about it, and that problem hasn't been resolved yet. So next year, we'll have an election in France, in Germany, and also we'll have referendum election in Italy in November. So that in October, that's also going to be huge trouble for the EU problem. So in this year, before the Brexit, the bank thought the 3 top issues is going to decide 2016 worldwide economic growth. The fourth thing was how fast the US is going to increase their interest rate. And the second thing was like how the China will slow down their growth. And third was how the oil price will behave. There was a 3 main concern of to many of the economists. So they have different views. Some think the US is great, China is bad, oil price is going down. Some people think the US is not that great, China is not as bad, oil price will come back. Depending on the different views, they have different views about the effects, they have different views about the global growth. Most of the market expected the US is actually very strong. So US is going to increase their interest rate 4 times this year. But actually they increased only once, and they are talking about another hike in December. But the banks, Standard Chartered thought, not really. US is not as strong as it looks. They already picked their growth in 2015. They will go down in 2016. And probably next move is not going to be the hike. It's going to be the cut. So we have a very different view from the market. And somehow, because of the Brexit, it kind of entertained more of our bank's idea. US is not able to increase interest rate this year. Because of the financial market instability and volatility, US is not going to end up increasing interest rate. Actually, because of the US, kind of uncertainty kind of has disappeared, the US may increase interest rate rapidly this year, help the emerging market. So after the Brexit, most of the emerging market cut their base rate to boost the economy. If you just follow the simple economics, if you cut your interest rate, if you supply more money, then your money should depreciate. But actually, other economies who cut the rate, their currency appreciated. Japan, New Zealand, Australia, they cut the rate, and their currency appreciated because because the market thought U.S. is not going to increase the interest rate this year. So because of the Brexit, the uncertainty around the U.S. rate hike has somehow disappeared. It is benefiting like emerging market. So that has been the opportunity to emerging markets. And China, some people thought that China, the growth is going to be slowed down in 2016. And also the corporate debt is too much, and that the real estate market is close to bubble. So also sometimes like Korea follows the Japan 20 years behind, and China maybe follow the same step as Korea or other Asian countries who follow developed model. Then around the 97, like Asian crisis, so there may be a Chinese crisis around 2017. So there was kind of a speculation about the China, and people thought like China will be horrible in 2016 and 17. Actually, our bank has different view about the China. Like if the one, say simply, if one base player hitting the hit, 30 games in a 30, winning the game 30 games in a row, I don't think you will bet that he's going to lose the 31st game. Probably he will lose in 60th game, but you won't bet he will lose the 31st game. So we thought that China will manage the risk in 2016 and maintain of the 6% growth level in 2016. So because of the Brexit, actually, that is hurting our prospect of the China. As I say, China has a strong exposure to EU, around 60% of their trading, and that is going to hurt the China. So right after Brexit, actually, Chinese yuan depreciate quite a lot. Unlike other emerging market currencies, Chinese yuan depreciates quite a lot. So that is going to be a big concern to bank's perspective. If the emerging market currency is hurting moving forward, it's going to be because of the weak Chinese yuan. India, I think there are many already specialists about India. I talked to the economist in India, so I asked her, what is the impact of the Brexit in India? And she told me, actually it's hard to know. There are so much uncertainties, it's hard to know. But right now it looks like the impact is going to be limited. If it is just limited to UK, its impact is going to be impacted. But as she said, because UK has a very significant importance in financial market, that is going to be the ongoing concern and instability they may face. So they are concerned about the instability in financial market, not much worried about the real market. And as you say, actually, it can be a benefit of the India if FTA between the UK and India goes ahead. In other Asian market, I talked to every economist in other Asian countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. They have a same kind of a feeling. The Brexit is going to be limited impact right away, but its impact will come eventually more like a mid to long term. The main reason is because of the confidence that is going to be the investment that's going to hurt the global economy. Then it will come to their market, and they are more concerned of the EU's the influence to the EU than not just of the UK itself. So also some when I talk to economists in Asian, they think actually can benefit the Asian countries because of the Brexit. Because of the Brexit, the money which used to go to the UK may come to Asian countries. So there are some positive kind of note, opportunity of the Brexit in Asian countries. Unlike the Asian countries, Asian countries is more have a current account surplus. So meaning you do not have to borrow money. Usually, actually, you have to do the other way. You have to do ship your money out of your country to invest. But in the African countries, is the other side. They are usually current account deficit, so they need to borrow the money. If they have to borrow the money, and then it should come from the financial market. and the UK is the center of the financial market. So UK's uncertainty is not a good news to African countries. So the country which need to borrow the money is not in good position. So when I talk to the African economies, they were concerned about the Brexit. So Brexit is going to impact quite a lot for the African economies in coming years, especially the countries who wants to move or have a more more flexible FX trading scheme. That is going to hurt their plan. So they were concerned. African countries were more concerned about the Brexit than any other reason globally. I mean, when I talk to the Middle East, the economists and their analysts, they're concerned about the impact of the Brexit on oil price, how the Brexit is going to affect the oil price. That will decide the economic future. In this year, there are two opposite views. As I say, some view think because of the supply glut, the oil price will go down below $40. Some people say because of the oversupply will kind of disappear this year, oil price will come back around $60 at the end of this year. So right after the Brexit, there's somehow oil story was more like a supply story, with oversupply or undersupply. That would decide the oil price. But when there was a Brexit, people start to see the demand side. What if it decreased the demand? If the demand goes down, so oil price will be hurted. That was the more concern right after Brexit. So right now it looks like so. Right after Brexit, oil price went down because people were concerned about the global economic shrink and the oil demand will go down. But we think that the demand, as the Brexit impact is settled down, the demand will be there. So it's going to be more. We'll come back to supply side story. So whether shale innovation is somehow disappear because of the low oil price. Somehow the oversupply will be down end of this year, so oil price will go back to $60. So we are very positive the oil. So that is positive news for the MENA countries, but the MENA countries are very, very concerned about the oil price. And also they think that because they are pegged to the US dollar, if the US dollar somehow appreciates a little bit, they will benefit for them, but that they're also concerned because of the uncertainty, a capital movement maybe affected, which is not good news for the MENA countries. So what's going to impact of the FX market in Brexit? Right after the Brexit, it is becoming clear other economies, the UK cut its base rate 25 basis points and expanding QE, and then we also expect the European Union will do more aggressive QE because the economy will slow down, and also other emerging countries are doing the dovish stance, like cutting the interest rate to boost the economy. So US is telling us they may plan to increase interest rates. So if you just follow the simple economic reason, the dollar should appreciate. But right now, dollar is not appreciating against the emerging currencies, mainly because the market is thinking US is not going to increase interest rate. And already emerging market rate is actually higher than US rate. And also emerging market rate is much higher than the negative rate of the EU. So that is benefiting of the emerging market. So it looks so now, but what if US changes its stance and they may increase interest rate around December? Then probably US dollar will start to appreciate. So we think right now we are in a kind of bottom line of the dollar smile, and US dollar will eventually pick it up. But the speed of picking up the dollar is not going to be as strong as early this year. If, for example, Korean won, dollar moved around 1150 to 1230 this year. But right now, this dollar is trading around 1128. We expect it will go up to 1150 or 60, but it will not go to 1200 because already the commodity price is doing okay, and China economy is doing okay. But as I said, the big concern to emerging market is going to be, what if the Chinese yuan depreciate quite rapidly? So there is a big concern that there's going to be ongoing risk, but right now it looks like the emerging market currencies will be stable. So dollar will appreciate slowly until end of the year. Oh, okay. So last news, the topic I want to talk about is how it's going to impact the interest rate. Well, we expect the interest rate will go down, obviously, because all the other economies are cutting the rate, and I mean, under the uncertainties, like when the risk up, people start to hold the bond more. So like the demand for the government bond will increase, that rate will go down. So it looks so like other treasury bond going down. Only problem with the forecast we are wrong is the US dollar LIBOR. Like LIBOR has been going up quite rapidly recently. It's because of the money market reform in US. So there is other issue related to the Brexit. So that is not related to the Brexit issue. So I will stop here. And if you have a question about the financial market, I will be happy to answer later. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the Indian Chamber of Commerce for the invitation. And today I'm talking about some issues, actually, when you're talking about the Brexit and then the impact of this Brexit to the Korea EU and also Korea UK economic relations, especially in the FTA issues. Maybe we have another new negotiations, actually, with the EU and also possibly maybe Korea UK or Korea Britain. I'm not sure that Korea UK, Britain or Korea England FTA. But anyway, right. Because the previous presenters talking about the many issues about the financial market, and so I will just pass the issues. But I want to talk about that in terms of the trade and investment issues that the Korea, the UK relations. Of course, I mean that is not so small, but that is not so substantial as well. So there will be quite a limited influence actually in trade and in investment issues in the short term. But in the longer term, maybe it's quite depending on what's going on in the institutional reform, institutional change between Korea and the EU, and also Korea and the UK as well. And there is just a very short summary of what will happen, what is to be done in the future, and then I would like to elaborate these issues later. So first of all, Korea and trade relations with the EU and the UK is generally weakened in the midterm. What I mean, in the short term, there will be no change actually in trade relations between the Korea and the EU, because the EU-Korea FTA, the all institutional, things that will apply after just until this Brexit negotiations ended. And also the cultural, but there is some kind of the change in mood and sentiments between the trade between the Korea and then the EU and Korea and the UK. People, businessmen as well, as something like the quite negative impact on the mood of the sentiments. So maybe you feel more comfortable that maybe you may change the Euro trade deal from the British line to the European some other lines, maybe is possible. And when you're talking about the Korea-EU FTA issues, then that there's we need to think about the renegotiation or review issue, and also I'd like to talk about the fundamental change of circumstances. That is jargon. In the treaties convention, and also I'm talking about the compensation issues, which is in GATT and GAS, And also, I'd like to emphasize what does it mean by the 5 years of entry into force of this Korea-EU FTA. And then I will talk about the concession, investment, intellectual property right issues. This is also maybe the EU has more interest when you're talking about the renegotiation or review this FTA. And I will briefly talk about the Korea-EU FTA. So what kind of the issues actually the UK might be interested when we initiate both parties initiate the new FTA. So this is quite a very big, but I was the one of the advisor to the Korea-EU FTA negotiations, and I was participating in the negotiation, and then I know something that what the UK was not satisfied with this FTA because the UK needed to be harmonize the common interest together with the European Union. So maybe if the Korea-UK FTA is initiated, then the UK would want to fit this FTA deal with the British interest. Okay. First of all, I'm talking about this Korea-EU FTA issue, but when you're talking about the renegotiation or review of this or change of this FTA, first of all, we need to think about what this Korea-EU FTA means. Is it really the mixed agreement or not? What does it mean by the mixed agreement? If the Korea-EU FTA is purely bilateral FTA, like the one party is Korea, Republic of Korea, and the other party is the EU, then there is no need to think about this is the mixed agreement. But you may easily think that the EU has exclusive competence on trade policy. So and the FTA is a trade agreement. So Korea and EU FTA should be purely bilateral. But in reality, that is not the case. The reason is that now the contemporary FTA is all very comprehensive. And comprehensive means not only the EU's exclusive competence, but also shared competence or supporting competence area is also included in the text. That is the reality. And now, if you have a chance to look at the text of the Korea-EU FTA, you can find out many issues which is not the exclusive competence of the EU. So in that case, if we admit that there is some more contents that there is not the exclusive competence of the European Union, it means that this is a mixed agreement. Mixed agreement means one party is the Republic of Korea, and the other parties are actually not only the European Union, but also member countries. In that case, even if Brexit happened, the UK still remain the Korea-EU FTA as an individual member. Okay, so whether or not this FTA is mixed agreement, that is one issue that we need to think about first. So, well, the title of this FTA is, the official name is the Free Trade Agreement between the Republic of Korea of the one part and the European Union and its member countries of the other part. It's a quite confusing name. And so the ambiguity arises due to the EU's competence areas what I'm talking. For instance, customs union, competition, common agricultural policy, common fishery policies, all that is the areas of EU's exclusive competence. But environmental issues, there is a shared competence. Shared means EU share this competence with member country. And the cultural area, that is actually the EU is just implementing, supporting, or shared supporting competence with the member country. So member country has a basic initiative, basic right to implement these issues of the cultural policy. But in the FTA text, so a party, but we can find out that this kind of the sentence, a party may suspend as a result of the other parties' modification, there is in Article 5 in Protocol on Cultural Cooperation of the text of the Korea-EU FTA. So if you have a look at the Korea-EU FTA text, then you can find out not only the trade policy or tariff rate concession, something like that, which is the areas of the exclusive competence of the European Union, but also you can find out this kind of cultural convention as well. And then, as I told you, that cultural convention is something like the shared and supporting competence. What I'm arguing today is that even if in the cultural cooperation issues, the sentence is like this: a party and the other party. So this means in the Korea-EU FTA there is an implicit, assumption that even if this area is not the exclusive competence of the European Union, then we maybe assume that it is a kind of bilateral FTA. So one party, Korea, the other party is the EU. And so if you admit that this kind of things, that we have a least possibility that this FTA is a mixed agreement. So this is the kind of the bilateral we can see. And in that case, how easy that both parties can denounce this FTA, and it's very, 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 very easy, for each party to denounce this FTA. For instance, like this, in the article 15, either party may notify in writing the other party of this intention to denounce the disagreement. Disagreement means Korea-EU FTA. So this is from the text of the Korea-EU FTA. And the termination of a treaty of the withdrawal of a party may take place at any time by consent of all the parties after consultation with the other contracting states. There is the Article 54 of B, a termination or withdrawal from a treaty in the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties in 1969. So most of the international treaties, such as the FTA, are also influenced by this Vienna Convention on the Law of the Treaties. We call it VCLT, right? So this means that Korea or the EU have a it's very natural for the both parties to raise the issues that this review or abolish the current FTA. And so something like the renegotiation. When the organizations renegotiation or review provisions can be in effect. That is a fundamental change of circumstance happen. When this kind of fundamental change happens, then we can renegotiate. I think there are 3 reasons why this Korea-EU FTA should be reviewed or renegotiated in the very near future. The first one is from the legal term, like in this VCLT, Vienna Convention, in the chapter 62 of the fundamental change of circumstance, there is the sentence: a fundamental change of circumstance which has occurred with regard to those existing at the time of blah 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 blah. The effect of change is radically to transform the extent of obligation still to be performed under the treaty. So there is one reason why this FTA is to be renegotiated or review. The second reason is highly probable this happens because it has passed more than 5 years since the entry into force of the FTA, and it's now a proper time to review the FTA. If you see the many parts of the text of the Korea-EU FTA, then you can easily find out that after 3 years, after 5 years, we have a review session, we have a review time, something like that. So now it's time to review. And the third reason is that in July, the ASEM summit meeting in Mongolia, and then the Korean president and then EU, head of the EU Commission, European Commission, and the president of the EU met, and then both parties basically agreed to review the FTA in the very near future. So I think that it's time for both parties, Korea and the EU, to review this FTA, to change the contents. And the second issue is about the compensation. So what does it mean by compensation? Why is the compensation happen? You know, the Korea-EU FTA is entered into force in the 2011, and based on the balance of the interest, both parties agreed that this FTA is, realize the balance of interest of the two parties, and then both people just agreed through the National Assembly or parliaments. And then now there is the fundamental change of circumstance because the Brexit happened. And the Britain is not so small country, not just 1% of EU, but there is more than 15 and even 18% of the EU. That is, we can say, the fundamental change, right? And so this means, of course, this is we can raise the issues of the renegotiation review, but also this means a kind of this is comparable to divorce. So one party has very big change, so that's violate the balance of the interest. So there is a reason why the compensation is this issues is raised. This is Article 24 of the GATT. Article 24 is telling about the regional trade agreement, RTA issues in WTO. And so when we are talking about the WTO, multilateral with the bilateral, then Article 24 is the most important provisions, articles that from the GATT. And then the provisions of this agreement shall not prevent provided that the duties and other regulations of commerce shall not, on the whole, be higher or more restrictive than the general instance of the duties and regulations of commerce. So that is just general provision. And then in such negotiations, compensation adjustment is required. And so, and if such reductions should not be sufficient to provide the necessary compensatory adjustment, the customs union would offer compensation, which take the form of duties on other tariff lines. So compensation can be, this problem can be raised, and the types of compensation is, lifting other tariff lines. Okay, that is the general principle. But can it happen? If the EU agree that that compensation is needed, then is it possible to think about the duties on the other tariff line? I'm not sure, because this is now the current concession schedule of the Korea-EU FTA. This is from the Korean side. So you can find out within 5 years, the 1st of July of this year, now we have 5 years entry into force of this FTA. So now this is the current situation. So more than 70%, more than 94% of the old tariff lines now they're tariff-free in the Korean market. And so this is now the situation. But in the case of the EU, this is concession schedule. So this means that the Korean traders now can export, can have a free market access to the EU. So there is no provision, no method, no way that for the EU to provide the favor to Korea in terms of the tariff line. So we need to develop some other types of the favor that the EU can provide to Korea. So that is another issue when we are talking about the Korea-EU FTA. Okay? And so, and another issue is about the period, the reasonable period of the negotiation. But normally, the 6 months is very important, critical point that if within the 6 months, if Korean government authorities do not raise this issue, then just it's forgot issues. But so this is something very strange. This is also important for the UK as well, because after the Brexit, when the Korea and the EU renegotiate the FTA, the EU may think that, okay, Brexit is initiated not by EU, but by Britain, okay? And then in the process, Article 50 is triggered not by EU, but by Britain. So it's the British UK responsibility to take all the burdens of the Brexit. But the situation is now that compensation process is being held between Korea and the EU. So this is unfair for the EU. So the EU can use the right of indemnity to the UK after compensation to Korea. So that is quite complicated issues, but anyway, there is a possibility of this kind of things. So when the divorce negotiations happens between the EU and the UK, then both parties need to think about this kind of issues as well. So all the compensation issues raised by the third party. So Brexit, negotiation is not so simple one. You need to think about the other issues that are related to the third party. Okay, third party, the United States, India, Korea, Japan, China, every other countries. And then I'd like to talk about what does it mean by the 5 year. 5 year means. And then after 5 years, of course, the quite substantial tariff lines, numbers of tariff lines, all tariff-free in Korean market. But also, it's also very important for the service market as well. Most of the service market liberalization in Korea just completed within the 5 years. So now, of course, you are not so satisfied with the level of the liberalization in service market, Korean service market, but you can say that within the framework of Korea-EU FTA, then 5 years is the ending period that you can enjoy the full 100% of the liberalization, market access of the service market. So this is the 5 years. If you have a look at the text of the Korea-EU FTA, then you can find out the 17 times of the 5 year. And then among the 17 times of 5 year, then the 5 year of entry into force, this meaning is about, I think that about 13 times of this 5 year is related to this kind of things. And then I just write down what does it mean by this 5 years in many provisions of this FTA text. So suppliers' declaration of conformity, this is also related to the 5 years, and motor vehicle part as well, and most of the things is services, and then this is a description of reservations. Italia is just after 5 years, Italia should open, so that is not related to the Korean market. And this is a service market access, not only in law firm, but also in accounting services and tax services as well. So 회계법인, 세무법인, tax agency, and accounting corporation. All these issues are now the foreign operators from the EU can enjoy the free market access in a sense to Korea. Whether or not you realize that you make use of this liberalization. Of course, I know that there are some problems now. When we are open the local law firm branch in Korea, there is something controversial issues between in terms of the interpretation of this clause between the Korean authority and then, the European law firms. But anyway, and also in terms of national treaties, also the 5 years is at the ending period for the reservation of the waste water services of the market access to Korean market. Okay, right. And also there is a review session. As I told you before, in the review sessions, there are so many things about talking about the review 5 years. So in many cases, 5 years is very important. Now it's time to review this FTA. Okay. duty drawback. Also, 5 years we have re-examinations of this so controversial issues. Duty drawback. Okay. And then before I'm talking about the Korea, the UK FTA, the Korea-EU FTA issues. After this, the FTA, then the EU side actually have more interest in the market opening of the some more services and also intellectual property right in pharmaceuticals and also GI as well. So in the geographical indications, that is geographical indication is one part of the intellectual property right, and then the EU asked the protection, full protection of GI, and in the GI provision in the Korea-EU FTA, not only cover wine and spirit area, but also cover agricultural product as well. And the agricultural products, intellectual property rights is one of the key interests of the EU. So the EU wants to expand the number of tariff lines, which is protected by under the protection of the IPR, GI. So maybe in the review sessions, EU may be more interested in the how to protect the expanded, the IPR in the agricultural GI. There is from the EU side, and also in pharmaceutical areas, Germany is particularly interested in the expansion, strengthening of the protection of the IPR in pharmaceuticals areas as well, and also some customs areas as well. So all of these kind of things will be raised, in the new review of this session, and then I think that this kind of things also quite substantially influence the your business, between the Korea and then EU, and also maybe the third parties as well. And then I'm not talking about the Korea-EU, Korea-UK FTA. Well, I don't think that this FTA is initiated in the short term. Maybe one reason is that the UK has, I think, no room to negotiate this FTA with the Republic of Korea. But maybe the UK is more interested in the BIT, bilateral investment treaties with China, or other types of the market, the preferential market access to the other country, including India. But one of the possibility of this Korea-UK FTA is that before initiating of this negotiation of the Korea-UK FTA, then maybe tentative application of this existing Korea-EU FTA could apply. That is maybe the both parties could easily agree. And then, but when these FTAs negotiations started, then maybe the UK is also very interested in the services, more market liberalization of the service market, and also intellectual property right as well. For instance, the agricultural GI as well. And and also the Korean authorities maybe need to think about who will be the partner, trading negotiating partner, the UK or the Britain, something like that. So that is quite ambiguous, but we don't think about this. We don't think we don't have to decide now, because there is about more than 5 years or even 10 years. Something like that. Okay, so yeah, I want to end. I want to close my speech now. Okay, thank you.
Well, while they prepare for Q&A session, I'd like to ask you how you enjoyed their presentation. How was it? Good. So did you enjoy? Thank you. Thank you. So I expected about half an hour for Q&A, but we have less than 20 minutes until 10:30. So say we have to follow Koreans practice 빨리빨리. So I'd like to open the floor, and before you ask the question, one, please identify who you are. Two, please identify the person whom you want to address your question. so that we can facilitate the Q&A process. So we, as I said in the beginning, we are so lucky to have Ms. Kinoshita as an opening speaker in the beginning. She might not have expected such a comprehensive and relevant speech by three speakers. So before I open the floor, I'll give her 2 minutes to share her impression on the speeches of those three speakers.
Right, thank you very much. I had expected some very good presentations. I must correct you there, and I was not disappointed. I think my main impression is I always knew this was going to be difficult, but I now think it's going to be even more difficult, having heard all the different issues that they have raised. I was very encouraged by the very positive picture that was painted by our colleague from Deloitte about the reasons for investing in the UK. That's all very good. And I'm thinking that we probably need to hire Dr. Kim to help us with our trade negotiations, because he's because he's raised a number of possibilities there that I wasn't previously aware of. As I said, we have a bit of a dearth of expertise in trade policy matters at the moment, so very interesting to get those insights about some other things that we need to think about. And of course, I have huge respect for Standard Chartered and for their analysis of international economic issues, and I thought that was a very comprehensive account of the implications for all different parts of the global economy. And again, I was slightly reassured to learn that for the most part the impacts will be fairly limited, but I hadn't realized how big the impact might be on Africa, and that's something I'm sure my colleagues in that part of the world are focusing on and thinking about. But it's great to get such a comprehensive overview. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to open the floor and enjoy Q&A. Lady first and gentleman next.
I have a question for Madam Su.
Please identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm Preeti Sharma and coming from Bangalore. I have a question for you, ma'am, that just after the voting results were out, a lot of people were talking about what is the risk in Brexit. We hardly had any discussions on what are the opportunities and how is it great. Okay. A lot of negative stuff was there across all platforms. If it was so negative in the whole sense, it was so risky, why was it even considered?
Gosh, that's a very big philosophical question. I mean, the political origins of the referendum are rooted in UK domestic politics, and the rise of parties like UKIP that were existed solely to try to encourage the UK to leave the EU. And I think the judgment by Prime Minister Cameron at the time was that if he held a referendum, people would dismiss that opportunity, and that would be the end of that irritant to the Conservative Party. it didn't quite work out as he had planned. There was a lot of criticism throughout the campaign period that the government was relying on project fear and simply emphasizing the downsides to try to frighten people out of voting to leave. As we saw, that didn't resonate with voters, and I think a lot of people felt that they didn't really have very much to lose, particularly, as I say, those people who felt marginalized by globalization didn't feel that they were reaping the benefits that other parts of the UK were. And so they kind of thought, in for a penny, in for a pound. Maybe if there had been a more positive spin on the benefits of EU membership, the outcome might have been different. I think now, I've read an article in the Financial Times recently that maybe now it should have been called Project So What, because nothing actually seems to have changed very much. But of course we haven't yet left the EU, so who knows what is going to happen in future. But as I tried to emphasize in my opening remarks, I think there are positives there. I think the increased flexibility, the increased agility, and the clearer articulation of a UK point of view on all sorts of international issues, I think could be beneficial. How that will play out in economic terms, I find it a little harder to judge at the moment.
If I may, I'd like to make one observation. The referendum was voted in favor of exit 52%. So 52 to 48%. So very narrow margin. You know, in Korea's presidential election, say in December 2012, President Park Geun-hye was elected with 52%. So 52, 48, exactly the same. Okay, next.
While I was waiting for the ladies, I almost forgot the question. So first of all, compliments to Dilip and the ICCK team for pulling it off and inviting such wonderful speakers who gave great insight. Thank you very much. So my question is to Dr. Kim on a specific FTA issue. Like, by the way, I'm working with SsangYong Motor. My name is Vasudev Tumbe, and I'm also on the board of the ICCK. So my question, Dr. Kim, is regarding FTA. Like SsangYong Motor, we are exporting to Europe and UK, and we are covered by the EU FTA. So I'm not sure how it will work out the way you mentioned. Like UK will trigger Article 50 and will be out of the European Union sometime, 6 months, 1 year, we don't know. So till then, I assume the EU FTA with Korea will hold good. And then on that day, perhaps UK will be out of the EU FTA. And then UK will have its own priorities in settling FTAs with respective countries, and Korea may not be on the top, considering the trade values. So in that zone, what happens? Like, we have the FTA with the European Union like it is now, and with UK, will it be, I'm not clear, it's a no man's land sort of. Can you please elaborate?
Well, I'm not the negotiator, or I'm not representing British embassy, but there are many possibilities. And I agree with your very big uncertainties. And first of all, I mean, the main priority is the trade negotiation between the UK and the EU. And but maybe the Korea and the UK may have a tentative agreement. I mean, in the course of the UK's negotiation with the EU, maybe just, I mean, after the Brexit, the negotiation ended, then maybe we have a kind of a tentative period of a grace period of 2 years, something like that, to just apply the existing, Korea EU FTA. And then we may have some kind of new initiation of the Korea-UK FTA. That is one possibility that is quite plausible. But the problem is that the main risk is from the UK side is that, as I noticed that, there is some instability in the UK, the United Kingdom system. That is disastrous things, and also both parties, the Korean government and other government, also watching the negotiation between the EU and the UK, and then maybe the third party, the third countries may raise very challenging and critical, issues when we are looking at the divorce negotiation. In that case, that is another risk for the businessman. Okay, there are many kind of the possibilities actually in this kind of the negotiation issues, and so in that case, I think that UK and then the EU could may show a kind of options to the third party. So I recommend the UK and the EU to show a kind of the option to the third country. That is very important. There is one very source of the success of the divorce negotiation. What I'm emphasizing today is that when both parties have a divorce negotiation, you need to recognize the importance of the third parties. We are all watching the divorce negotiation, and you should have some options, many options, to for the third parties to satisfy. Without that kind of things, the divorce negotiation itself could be very, very easy to fail, or something like delayed.
I thank you for your relevant question, because it's not only related to Ssangyong Motors, it's related to any companies. Your question is, until the Brexit negotiation is concluded, is Korea-EU FTA valid? The answer is yes. So after the negotiation is fixed, concluded, then Korea may have to negotiate with UK separately. Until then, Korea-EU FTA is valid. So over the next at least 2 years or so, you don't have to worry about Sangyong's export to UK. But beyond that, probably his answer is valid. So any other questions?
I have a question for Mr. David. You mentioned about
yeah, please.
Yes.
You and next, yes, I recognize you. So he first and
Yes.
you next.
Hi, I am Shwetang Sharma from IIM Bangalore. You mentioned about the labor issue, how 15% of is non-UK origin labor. Now, we in India many people in India are quite optimistic about this labor situation. We feel that the markets will open up to Indian labor. Many people are just saying UK will become more globalized than it was earlier. What do you feel about this?
Okay, personal view. Well, that was one of the comments and arguments made during Brexit, that we could become more open to other countries, and in particular India. Ultimately, it'll be a policy decision about what we think is the right number of immigrants to the UK, and what skills we want those immigrants to have. So again, it will be a question for government to decide. I can personally see the positives in that, and being able to choose kind of who you want to enter the country. But actually, I'm not sure people that were voting on a kind of an anti-immigration view have a preference to have Indian immigrants versus Polish immigrants. It's an immigrant. So I don't know, Sue.
So
You've got
even if the question was addressed to Mr. Fallon, I'd like to ask Ms. Kinoshita to add.
Yeah, there was a very interesting survey done over the weekend by a British think tank which revealed that the majority of people in the UK felt that it was important to remain open to immigration, particularly of people with the skills that we need. And that was true both of those who'd voted to remain in the EU and of those who'd voted to leave the EU. So again, this idea that voting for exit was an anti-immigration vote, I think is just not true. And so there is widespread agreement across the country that we do still need immigrant workers, particularly in skilled areas and particularly in those where I know Indian companies and Indian nationals offer an awful lot of skills. So I can't make any predictions. I think that's the trouble with a lot of this. We're all speculating. There are very few certainties around. But I certainly think increased globalization and a more flexible immigration regime are very possible outcomes.
Yes, the gentleman over there.
Hi, I'm Nikhil Goyal. I'm student at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. My question is to Mr. David. So, after Brexit, and the question is related to the free trade agreements between UK and other countries. So, after Brexit, UK has two options. One is to do one FTA agreement with EU and continue to enjoy the EU FTA arrangements, and the second is to go ahead and have a FTA with each country individually. So is there a trade-off in this, in the sense that if they continue with EU with one FTA, would the impact on global business scenario would be less?
Yeah, I'd like to say straight off the bat that I'm not an international trade guru in that respect. So I'm not sure, to be honest. I've got a view on that one. It's in the difficult box from my perspective. I don't know. Do you
Who would answer his question?
Member countries of the EU has no competence in the negotiating trade policy, so the UK should negotiate the divorce negotiation with the EU. So that is basically the bilateral trade negotiations. So that is not so complicated, at least in terms of the the structure of the negotiation. Okay, and then the UK is now the recovering the competence in the trade policy. So it's the UK's responsibility to implement the trade negotiation with the third parties, third countries. So there is a huge burden for the UK. Okay, and after that.
Okay.
The gentleman at table 4. Huh? Was she the first? I see. I didn't see. Okay. Then lastly, you. So the lady.
Hi, I'm Reema Bose. I'm a student at IIM Bangalore. So my question is to Mr. Fallon. You mentioned that there is an opportunity for foreign buyers to acquire UK assets with a depreciated sterling. So, and from what I understand from Ms. Kinoshita's speech is that the UK economy is very stable. The fundamentals are very stable, so the sterling is going to stabilize. So I want to understand that during this period, like, is there an opportunity for like foreign companies like TCAs to acquire UK assets? And I mean, how are the interest rates and how are the exchange rates? Is it, if it's a like fixed interest rate, then how is it that the sterling is expected to depreciate?
Well, let me talk about the M&A side, and just in terms of what I'm seeing from a Northeast Asia perspective. So immediately post-Brexit, there probably was a hiatus on M&A activity to a certain extent in relation to the UK, whilst investors try to take stock on the position and whether the deal should still go ahead. What I'm personally seeing, and we need to sort of see how this plays out over the next few months, is that there is increased activity, certain from this region, and in particular China, looking to acquire assets on the cheap. So I think where sterling is at the moment, there definitely is opportunities for foreign investors to acquire UK assets. And some of those won't necessarily be tied to the UK economic or the economy. Some of the decisions to buy assets will be strategic. They'll want to buy companies that they can exploit the kind of IP and things in their own markets. So we're not necessarily tied to the future of the UK economy in that respect. It's more about what foreign investors can do with what they're acquiring in their own markets. And that, I think, is an opportunity for China, and it's probably an opportunity for Indian investment as well.
Lastly, the gentleman at table 4.
Okay, hi, my name is Raj. I'm from IIM Bangalore. My question is addressed to both Mrs. Kinoshita and Dr. Kim. So there is a possibility that English might no longer be the official language in EU. So I'd like to understand what is the economic impact of this in terms of what it means to the UK, to the EU, and the rest of the world. So both your views.
Yes, it's one of the more obscure impacts, possibly, of the UK departing, unless Ireland decides to change to English as its preferred official language rather than Gaelic, then yes, English could in theory disappear. It's hard to imagine that that it will. English is a global language, not so much because of the UK, but because of the US. And I think it's so much now a language of international business and international diplomacy. It's hard to imagine somebody saying, no, we need to renegotiate everything and put it all into French instead of English. So I think we've got quite a lot of other things to concentrate, which are probably more important than that one. But I don't know, it's a very interesting question to raise.
I don't think that the English dominance in the business would change. Maybe the only change that I can imagine is that maybe British people tends to have more abide by the NICLAG. Some argument that the British should learn the more foreign languages after that. And then I'd like to support your answer to the exchange rate and other things. That I think that there is a higher possibility of after Brexit, a higher possibility of the currency attack on the sterling pound after the Brexit. And so, if the British, Bank of England should remain the lower interest rate, but and it means that the sterling pound will be weakened. And if the British, the authorities want to restore the value of the sterling pound, in a certain reason, then that could easily lead to the kind of a currency attack on the sterling pound. That is a disaster for the British economy.
Thank you so much.
One last thing I want to add for
yes, please.
For the FX is, unlike the market, bond market, stock market, it can be a win-win situation, like investor and the whole market. But the FX market is more like a win and lose market. Somebody wins, somebody loses. So the market is very speculative. So it got to be just the bet on the market based on FX. As I said, we expect the pound will depreciate a little bit, but it will normalize end of the year. And it has shown like a huge depreciation, and it normalized. I think it went down around 7% right after the Brexit. But always I say, the market itself is very speculative, so you need to be watch out for the FX market.
So we can go on and go on, but in the interest of time, I am forced to conclude the Q&A session. And firstly, originally I was asked to make a summary, but I gave up. And so first, I'd like to thank speakers for their wonderful presentation and answers to questions. Next, I'd like to you, audience, who made the ICCK Brexit seminar possible by coming to this place so early in the morning. Without your participation, this seminar wouldn't be possible. Lastly, but most importantly, I'd like to thank ICCK, especially the chairman of ICCK, Mr. Dilip Sundaram, for hosting this Brexit breakfast seminar at the right time with wonderful speakers, with wonderful audience. Thank you so much.